This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm Patrick Gulo.
All right, Patrick, I'm going to make you do that one more time because you were breaking up as you were doing it.
Take two.
All right.
This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm Patrick Gulo.
I'm Nate Blyton.
And I'm David McDonald.
And this week on SoundNotion, we're happy to have with us composer Craig Carnahan. Aside from his composerly work, Craig is Vice President of Programs at the American Composers Forum. And the ACF is definitely something we'll want to discuss today as we approach the National Composer Night Out in honor of ACF's 40th anniversary. Craig, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. So it's great to be with you.
Yeah. So, before we get into everything, the Composer Night Out, which we definitely want to talk about, the 40th anniversary, maybe we can just talk a little bit about what the American Composers Forum is and what it does for the composer-performer community.
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that. The American Composers Forum is a membership services organization. So at any given time, we have probably between 17 and 1,800 members, primarily composers, although we have performers and conductors and just fans of new music. Throughout the country, we have members in every state and in 18 other countries. And the organization's been around for about 40 years. And we provide just a variety of programs and resources that primarily are designed to help composers create and sustain a career as a composer, however they decide to define that and whatever trajectory that's on. So we have usually about 24 programs that are active at any point, and they range from sort of the most popular ones, of course, are grant programs and commissioning programs that literally put money in the pocket of composers so they can create work. We have residency programs that engage composers with religious institutions, churches and synagogues, schools, hospitals, you name it. Just chances for composers to get outside and sort of connect with the community. We have big reading programs that we just finished a major one last week that are opportunities for composers to hear their music performed by major professional ensembles. We have a variety of competitions for composers at various stages in their careers. We have a record label, Innova, which yearly contributes about 24, 25 new recordings, really cutting-edge music that's happening, very eclectic mix of music that's happening right now. We have education programs that really address from sort of middle school all the way up through college, students who want to create music. So, the organization is wide-ranging. We're 40 years old, and some things have probably, changed over those 40 years. But I think sort of the two main centerpieces of the forum have really been the same from day one, which is, the first one is, it really is to provide those resources and help composers sort of navigate a career after they're out of the academy. The notion was that, and we hear this a lot from our members, that they feel like they got an excellent education in all of the academic areas necessary to be a composer, so orchestration and harmony and electronics and that kind of thing, but got very little training when it came time to say, okay, now you've graduated, how do you negotiate contracts, how do you handle taxes, how do you distribute your music, how do you promote yourself, the kinds of nuts and bolts sorts of issues.
Yeah.
And so we've been trying to provide that, as well as then really provide interesting and productive links between composers and a variety of communities. So those are sort of the two main parts of our mission and vision.
Right, and something we talk about on the show a lot is that very thing of not being prepared for the real world after you finish your degree. There really isn't a curriculum designed around that, I guess.
And,
So
and it's hard to design a curriculum around it because it's changing so quickly, and everybody's situation is a little bit different. It's hard to have a blanket prescription, and that's why I think resources like the things that ACF puts online for you to just look at and find the parts of it that apply to you and work for you, as opposed to something like learning it in. Almost, I think it's better that it's something that you learn after school and not in school. Or separate from school, maybe not after school. Maybe you should learn it while you're in school.
Sure.
We talk about it almost as the analogy of a toolkit or a tool belt, and providing all the all the tools that are out there, and not all of them are going to work for everybody, but they're there, and you can pick and choose what ones really are applicable to you and are helpful to you, and use them. So.
Yeah, and certainly I've found those resources very valuable in the past. And also, Innova, you mentioned briefly, and we've had a bunch of Innova recordings that we've talked about on the show, and we've had composers and performers that are releasing new albums on Innova, talking about them on the show before. It's a wonderful service. If you're not familiar with Innova's recordings, they're at innova.mu. Is that correct, Craig?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they've got the thing that's really cool about the records is that they are all over the place. There are some recordings on Innova that would never be made by any commercial record label, and it's just really wonderful that somebody is making these recordings of this music that seemingly we would otherwise lose or not be able to access. Like we were talking before the show started about where we all are. It's a very common question. In fact, almost every single guest, when we ask, do you have any questions before we start, the first question they ask is, where are you people? And it's interesting because we have guests on from all over the world, and we are spread out across at least the eastern United States. And it's great to have these conversations, but it's very difficult to share music across those distances. And people making great things in Texas and in California or Oregon are things that I would never get to hear were it not for recording series like Innova.
You're correct. You're right, and we talk about it a lot as sort of our concert series. And it's again 24 or 25 really unique, interesting, beautifully produced recordings, and we get one or two in our mailboxes every month, and it's always fun to unwrap them and hear what the latest sounds are from the label.
Yeah, indeed. So let's kind of talk a little bit about what ACF has going on this year. It's a big year for the ACF. You said that earlier in your introduction. They've been around for almost 40 years, and so to celebrate that, there are a couple of big events going on this year. So tell us a little bit about what ACF is doing special for 2015.
Sure. This is our 40th anniversary. We were actually founded in 1973 by Stephen Paulus and Libby Larson when they were still students at the School of Music at the University of Minnesota. And they created a student organization that supported composers. And it was so popular that once they graduated, they decided to create this organization. And it was incorporated as the Minnesota Composers Forum in 1975. And it existed with that name for quite some time. And then right before the millennium, the name was changed to American Composers Forum. And I think that really reflected the fact that at that point our membership and the programs that we offered had greatly outgrown the borders of Minnesota and really had spread across the country. And so we've been the American Composers Forum, and this is our 40th year, and we've sort of used this as an opportunity not just to sort of look back and celebrate what we've accomplished, but I think the real goal of the staff and the board is to talk about what we have experienced and what we've learned over these years, and use that as a springboard to launch us into the next 10 years, next 20 years, next 30 years, wherever that takes us. And so we've created a special section on our website called Celebrating 40 Years. That is, some of it is devoted to our history, and there's a really fun timeline that's interactive. But more often than not, what it really talks about is our future. And we are going to have a big party on May 14th. It's a Thursday evening And it will be centered at the Landmark Center in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is where our offices are. It's a beautiful old court building, federal court building that has a huge cortile in the middle of it. And we'll have a party that evening that will have all kinds of activities. But we started talking about the fact that, unless you live within easy driving distance of downtown St. Paul, that's something you really can't easily participate in. So this idea for a National Composer Night Out came up. And on our program committee, some members came up with this idea. And it really is a chance for folks all over the country to sponsor an event that evening. And we're not dictating what those events have to be. They don't have to be concerts, although some people have planned concerts of new music. They can be house parties. They can be open rehearsals. They can be just a gathering of folks at your favorite watering hole. The common denominator needs to be that it involves composers and provides an opportunity for them to sort of meet each other and network and build community. And as soon as they register their event on our National Composer Night Out page, they get access to quite a bit of information. There's a little toolkit that gives them information about how to create a press release, how to create invitations, how to create announcements on a variety of social media, sort of a timeline to help them plan their events, all kinds of things that they can download for free. There's also an interactive map of the United States that will have a little electronic pin for every event, so you'll be able to scan what's happening across the country and see what's close to you. And so then the other aspect of that will be that those events will get instructions on how to connect electronically through Google Hangout or Twitter with the event we're hosting in St. Paul. So when you walk into our event, there'll be all kinds of screens with images and messages and things projected from these events all over the country, and it'll be a two-way street, so we can project as well to them and connect with them. So we're hoping for a bunch of events. We already have about a dozen that have officially registered and are starting their planning process. I think I've had maybe 10 or 12 additional verbal commitments from folks all over the country saying they definitely are planning something. And then we've got a variety of other groups that are sort of in the planning stage. So that's one way to connect with us. The other is through sort of a musical SoundCloud opportunity. So if you don't want to do an event or you're not in a community that has enough composers to really do something meaningful, you can still participate by submitting 4 seconds, a second for each of our decades, of your music plus a photo to Philip Blackburn, who runs Innova. And he'll put all of this together into a SoundCloud file, and that's going to really be the soundtrack for our party in St. Paul on May 14th. And so every 4 seconds, the music is going to change. A new photo with the name of a composer will change, and those are going to be projected as well. And we're calling that chained melody as opposed to unchained melody.
Sure.
And so, there's kind of two ways to participate. But we're really trying to build national visibility on May 14th for composers and what they do and provide a sort of a vehicle for them to connect.
Now, national visibility, you're talking about just regular people knowing that there are still these people writing classical or concert music or whatever.
That and I think that we're convinced, and I hope we're not naive, that if there are enough of these and that there's enough of a groundswell of support for this, that we could really generate some public relations around it, and some media coverage of this. I mean, it's a big advocacy tool for us, again, about just raising awareness about all the composers that are out there and in communities and doing work. So.
Yeah. So I think it's a really interesting project, and it's interesting that people are able to participate in a lot of different ways. Do you have any suggestions for people that are doing these things? Like, what kinds of events do you hope to see, or based on the people that have registered so far, is there anything that you wish you were seeing more of?
Not really. As I say, we don't have expectations that people have to go out and organize big formal concerts. It really, the sky's the limit. It's really what the composers in their local communities think would be the most valuable to them. And as I say, we've got about a dozen events so far, and two or three of them are concerts. Either one or two composers who've gotten together and are going to program an evening of their music. Some of them are broader than that, include music from a variety of composers. There's a group in Denver, a marvelous choir, that is doing an open rehearsal that night, and they're doing a lot of contemporary music in their concert that's coming up. So they're opening the rehearsal to composers to come in, participate in the rehearsal, and then go out afterwards for social activity. We've got some folks that are just doing a pizza and beer, 6 o'clock happy hour kind of thing in their living room. Again, as long as it's something that connects composers, brings them together, builds this sense of community, that's really what we're after.
That's really great. And I wonder, there seems to me to be an opportunity for a fair amount of creativity in coming up with an interesting event that's going to serve composers and also allow us to somehow connect with the people in our community. Because it's a really interesting problem to solve. Because even in the instances that we have communities of composers, it's rare, at least in my experience, for that community of composers to have a lot of connections to what, for lack of a better word, I will call normal people.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll have to come up with something interesting that we could do.
Absolutely. More the merrier. So.
And so how do people get involved doing that? They have now a few months to go if they're interested in putting this together.
Exactly. The event is May 14th, and both for the SoundCloud and for the National Composer Night Out events, we're hoping that folks will sort of submit their materials by May 1st. So we've got a couple of weeks to kind of do put together the infrastructure that we need to make the events happen and connect everybody. But you can go to our website, which is just composersforum.org. And as soon as you pull up the homepage, there's a banner, big red banner across the top that literally says Celebrating 40 Years. And if you click on that, it'll take you to a new area of our site that we've created specifically around the 40th anniversary. And it contains a variety of information about the past as well as the future. And one of the menus is National Composer Night Out. And obviously, if you click on that, it'll take you to a page that spells out both of the opportunities and has links to let you download your material. Probably a more direct route is if you just go to our homepage and scroll down to the sort of the bottom right corner, you'll see the logo for National Composer Night Out and a direct link that takes you directly to the page. So so I think it's pretty self-explanatory, pretty simple. We're trying to make it as easy for people to participate as possible. So those are the most direct ways.
It's pretty neat.
Go ahead, Nate.
On that page, you've got the map of. Are these people who have submitted already?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there are a couple that are still a couple pins that haven't shown up yet.
Cool.
But yeah, those are. We've got Tennessee and Dallas and I think Connecticut and North
Carolina, Texas,
Minnesota.
Yeah, all over.
So. And we've got commitments from.
Clearly, we're all derelict here because there are no pins in Michigan or Florida.
Well, by the end of the day, I hope to see those.
I think Dave's hosting a party. Did you just say that, Dave?
Yeah, in my apartment.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah, I don't see one in New York actually either, Patrick.
There actually is one. That's one of the pending pins. So.
Oh, okay, cool.
But New York's huge, so it can.
Yeah, right. I'll have to check out who the host of that is.
Oh yeah.
It'll probably be in Brooklyn. I have to trek it all the way there.
Oh,
well, you just have to make one closer to you.
Yeah.
That's the Astoria Queens American Composers Forum National Composer Night Out is happening in Astoria.
That's a great way to it.
You're gonna have everybody over at your place, right, Patrick?
Yeah, there's gonna be lots of Greek things going on.
There you go. So you mentioned also, Craig, this other kind of connection that people can make with ACF turning 40. This paper chain, as it's described on the site, and this is, I think, an interesting thing because it requires the composer to make a thing, even though it's only 4 seconds. I think that most composers would sweat 4 seconds to an unreasonable degree. So tell us about what that is about and what the goal is with all these SoundCloud uploads.
Well, the goal isn't to make composers sweat. That's, hopefully, again, it's sort
Sweat in
of
a fun way.
it's as user friendly as possible. We did something like this for our 35th anniversary. The clips were longer, but this is fascinating and again very eclectic kind of musical tapestry that represented the members that wanted to participate at least. The idea here, because it's more of a national program this year, is to cut back on the time. Because even at 4-second clips, if we get a lot of them, it can cover, a big chunk of time.
Go all night for sure.
Yeah, exactly. But it really is. It will play, throughout the event we're having at the Landmark Center, and then it's something that'll live on our website, so people will be able to experience after it. But again, with every 4 seconds, we're asking the composers to submit a photo of themselves as well, and so the photo will appear along with their name and their where they're located. Every 4 seconds, it'll be this sort of multimedia kind of presentation.
Very cool. And that could be a thing that I like the idea of it living on forever past the actual live event.
Yeah. Well, and we've got a composer who is very, very active, but she lives on an island outside of Seattle, and she said, I'm the only composer on the island, so I can't do it.
We know her.
Just talking about her yesterday.
Okay. And so he said, well, you can still, be represented with and the chain melody. So.
Yeah, perfect.
You'll be the.
Well, Alex could host a party for all the composers that live on her island.
Exactly.
It'd be her and her cat, and they'd have a grand time, I'm sure.
I love it on this page about the on this heading, the musical paper chain on SoundCloud. At the bottom of that, you even have instructions for how to use iTunes to cut 4 seconds out of one of your MP3 files.
That was put on for me because I don't know how to do that. To help educate me, I think.
It's brilliant.
Well, I'll look forward to checking that out, and I'll definitely have to contribute. It's the best thing about the 4 second clip is that it is such a actually. So I made a joke about like sweating a 4 second composition, but what's great about it is that it's only 4 seconds, and you can put a 4 second audio thing together in an afternoon or 15 minutes if you want, but you can participate in this crazy national event by just sending 4 seconds to SoundCloud. So that's such a fun little thing to do that I don't see how anybody could avoid doing it.
Right.
And it's something that's going to live on after the May 14th events are done. That SoundCloud, that's going to continue to exist. And so,
I mean,
absolutely,
use it whenever they wish.
That'll be fun. I'll have to make all of my students listen to it.
Exactly.
Well, they'll be out of school. We'll have to wait till the fall, but we'll definitely make them listen to it. So it's a good thing it's going to stick around. You were telling us before that you had a pretty busy week, Craig, at the Minnesota Orchestra Composer Institute, which is another wonderful project that ACF's been involved in for a while. And it was on the rocks for a while when the Minnesota Orchestra was locked out. And we had Aaron J. Kernis on the show to talk about that. If you're curious, you should go back and listen to our interview about the Composer Institute with Kernis. It was really interesting interview about the process and how much he loves the people that he was working with doing that stuff. But it has been revived in its new guise with Kevin Putz, and we've talked about that a little bit on the show. But do you want to tell us a little bit about the Composer Institute, Craig, and how things went this week?
Sure. Yeah, it's one of our I think blue ribbon programs, and we were heartsick when it kind of went on hiatus for a couple of years. But thrilled that it's back, and I think it's with Kevin leading it now. There's new ideas and new energy, and so we're really excited about the future. He has a 3-year contract, so we know it's going to continue for several more years at least. And there was a reception last week. The new incoming president of the Minnesota Orchestra sort of enforced their commitment to continuing the program for a long time. So it's a week-long, very intense boot camp experience. Every year, 6 or 7 composers are chosen, folks who've had pretty limited experience writing, for major orchestras. So sort of emerging younger.
So like most composers?
Pardon me?
Most composers have had very limited experience writing for major orchestras?
Yeah, exactly. And, it's exciting because all of the scores come to the Composers Forum office, and we open them all and log them all and deal with them. And we usually get between 170 and 190 submissions for this. And as I say, there's 6 or 7 of them are chosen. And then those composers are brought to Minnesota for a very intensive week of rehearsals and workshop sessions. There are the concertmaster, the principal trumpet, the percussionist, harp, variety of the musicians, and the orchestra do sessions on effectively writing for their instruments. We bring in Jim Kendrick, who's one of the leading intellectual property attorneys in the country, to do sessions on copyrights and contracts. Bill Holub, who's kind of the music copyist to the stars. We bring him in, and he does a great session on effective score and part, preparation. There are sessions on grant writing. There's just a variety of, again, sort of the practical nuts and bolts issues as well as the artistic issues. And then there are 2 days of rehearsals and then a big public concert. So the Institute culminated last Friday night. It's called the Future Classics Concert, and Osmo Venska, who's artistic director of Minnesota Orchestra, conducts the orchestra in these 7 pieces. And it draws 1,800 or 1,900 people, and it's the most attentive, the audience hangs on every single note. It's really an amazing experience. So the composers that we featured last week were actually chosen in 2012. And we're supposed to have been performed in the 2013 Composer Institute. As you said, we took a couple of years off, and so now we just announced the 2016 Institute. The application deadline, I think, is in late April, so folks still have lots of opportunity to submit scores for that. And then I think it's the 3rd week in January in 2016 when the next institute will take place. So it's quite an experience. It's exhausting and exhilarating at the same time. It's a very intense week.
But it's so exciting too. I can't imagine. I've never been to one, but I can't imagine how exciting that must be. Not only for the composers that are there, but for the audience and for ACF to hear all this great stuff that people are making. And I have gone in the past and looked through music that I can find online from those composers that are at the Institute, and it actually reminds me a little bit of the thing that we talked earlier about Inova, is that it's so the diversity of musical styles and that people are writing in for orchestra is so compelling, and it's so exciting to see. We talk about orchestra on the show occasionally because it's just a large institutional thing, and it's just it's hard to avoid when you're reading about the arts, reading about orchestras, but at the same time, we sometimes wonder how viable a medium orchestra is, especially in the United States. And to hear what these people are doing with this amazing force of wonderful musicians at Minnesota is really inspiring.
It is, and you hear a lot about our orchestra's dead, so to see that 185 or more composers are submitting, orchestral music that they're writing, to this opportunity. There's Earshot, that's doing great work with similar institutes and reading sessions that also, the response to Earshot is always really high. So folks are still really actively writing orchestral music. So
right.
And
there are clearly enough people like ACF in Minnesota and Earshot and American Composers Orchestra that are looking for those great works. So that's pretty cool. Yep. Maybe it's not as dead as I usually say it is. So maybe should we move on to some of our headlines? And when I say our headlines, I mean our headline.
Headline.
Speaking of orchestras, actually, we had talked a lot about the Spring for Music Festival before. It was a wonderful festival. It was at Carnegie, right, Patrick, or was it at Lincoln Center?
It was at Carnegie. Had been at Carnegie for the last 4 years.
So it was a wonderful series of concerts that took place in over about a week span, and it had orchestras from all over the United States, which is really cool to hear all these regional orchestras that are doing wonderful work. And I say regional orchestras, I don't mean in the pejorative sense, but regional as in not the New York Philharmonic, but in New York City. And the Seattle Orchestra would come in, Minnesota Orchestra had come in. St. Louis Symphony had gone. Gosh, what are some others?
Rochester.
Yes, Rochester.
Detroit. Just an opportunity for these orchestras around the country, around I believe North America, to come and play their music. And
for people who would never ordinarily get to hear those particular players and play music that is very special to them, I think was another really interesting part about it, is that when an orchestra would go to Spring for Music, Minnesota had their long-term Sibelius recording project, and they would go and play Sibelius at Spring for Music. And Seattle and George Schwartz would do music that they had commissioned for Seattle in New York for Spring for Music, and that was really cool. And it was really sad when the funding kind of dried up and it ended. I guess last year was the last incarnation of it.
Yeah, last year. It was with Seattle. It was Ludovic Morlot, though. I should point out.
Oh, you're right. You're right. I misspoke.
But they did do the John Luther Adams this past the Become Ocean, which was kind of an incredible event that everyone came out for that you simply could not get tickets to.
Right. And it was funny because it had been premiered before, and it had just won the Pulitzer right before this performance, right?
I believe so. I believe that was it. Yeah.
It was a very unusual circumstance where something wins the Pulitzer, and then you find out, oh yeah, I can go see that live next week. But that never happens.
Right.
Usually it's like, is there a recording available, please?
Yeah.
But anyways, that was wonderful. So anyway, the reason that we're talking about this thing that hasn't happened for a year is that it is kind of sort of back in a new form at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. So it's not in New York City, it's in Washington. But it is a similar festival of American orchestras. It is called Shift, a festival of American orchestras. And it's going to be at the Kennedy Center. It's for at least the next 3 years. It's a Deborah Rutter joint. We talked about Deborah Rutter becoming the president of the Kennedy Center. They snatched her up. She was in Kansas City, right? She was running Kansas City Opera.
No, that was Jane Chu.
Oh, you're right. No,
Deborah Rutter was at
Chicago. She's going to be the NEA chair. Right, you're right. They're both lovely Midwestern people that are now running two major now running two major arts organizations on the East Coast. I get them mixed up. Yes, but you're right. Jane Chu was Kansas City and is the NEA chair nominee, and anyway, Deborah Rutter from Chicago, now Kennedy Center. Sorry, I'm a dummy. But anyway, this is going to be one of her first big projects that she puts together, and we can't wait to see where it goes. I can't imagine that Chicago will not be tripping on out to Washington, D.C. in the next couple of years to perform at Shift. But I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on resurrecting the Spring for Music model as Shift?
I think it's good. Everyone didn't like when Spring for Music ended. There was 100% of that happening. So I don't think it was just sad. This last year it was like this was going to be the last one, and yeah. But I can't see how anybody would be upset that it's coming back. I mean, the fact that it's in at the Kennedy Center, the Kennedy Center is kind of awesome. I went there last year, and I kind of toured around each of the halls and stuff. It's awesome. It's a huge.
I will say they're only kind of awesome.
It's all right. It's kind of awesome.
They're,
I mean, it's not.
they're really great.
It's not. I mean, there's some star power, I guess, in going to the nation's capital. It's not Carnegie Hall. It's not Lincoln Center. But
I was making a joke, and now you're actually slamming them.
no, I'm not slamming them. I think the idea of Spring for Music was like come to like this musical capital of the country sort of thing, and play at.
That is a nice. Yeah, I get that.
But I don't think it's any less that it's at the Kennedy Center, I should say.
No, and I think that is actually a nice kind of way to frame this now that it is in the nation's capital, is that the orchestras from all over the country come and share what they do with a new audience in the nation's capital. So as though people are coming in and going out all the time. Yeah. That's very exciting. Do you have any thoughts on Shift, Craig?
No, I think it's great that it's resurrected, and Deborah's got such vision and energy, so it's going to be exciting to see what they pull off.
We have a pet cameo on SoundNotion. This is a regular occurrence. Cats on SoundNotion.
Yeah, I've been fending him off, but I've also been getting bitten. So I find it.
Oh no, he can hang out.
Mm-hmm. Cats are always welcome.
This is our casual conversation. We can have as many cats as we want. Craig, thank you so much for being with us this morning. This has been a lot of fun talking to you.
Yeah, I agree. I've had a blast. So.
And just one more time, let people know where they can go to find out about what ACF has going on before we wrap up.
Yeah, the website is composersforum.org. And not only does it have information about our 40th anniversary and National Composer Night Out, but you can find all kinds of information about all of the programs we offer. And there's also a link that takes you directly to the INAVA site, which is a separate website. But also it's a great way to spend an afternoon searching through that, through their catalog and see what they're doing. So
yeah, it's fun. It's a fun place to poke around, and
Yep.
it's like Netflix in that you can start by just see what's there, and then all of a sudden it's 4 days later, right? Because there's just that's interesting. I wonder what that's like. Oh, that's pretty interesting. Oh, well, listen to all of that. Pretty soon you need to shave and go to work.
Yeah, binge listening to Innova sounds like a good weekend. Definitely.
Yeah. So you should all do that, composersforum.org. And if you would like links to any of these projects that we've been talking about with Craig all morning, you can find those in our show notes, which are going to be at soundnotion.tv/SN, which is where you'll find links to all the things that we spoke about. You can also leave a comment there if you have any thoughts on the show. We're also happy to connect with you on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. You can leave comments there. If you'd like to suggest a topic or a guest interview or something like that for the show, you can tweet us with hashtag SNWeekly, and we check that out as we're putting the show together each week. You can subscribe to this show and all our shows in the iTunes Store and everywhere else you get your podcasts. But it would really help us out a lot for those listening if you can leave us a review, rate us, and leave us a review in the iTunes Store. That helps people find us. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so using the Amazon affiliate search on our site. It's a little Amazon search box on the right side of our site. If you're doing your normal shopping on Amazon, if you search for it through that little box, we get a little tiny commission for sending you there. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps us out a lot. Thank you to everyone who did that for your holiday shopping, by the way. If you'd like to donate, you can do that using the PayPal links on our site as well. SoundNotion's introduction includes music by Patrick Gulo, and we will be back next week. Thank you so much for listening.